Alrighty, so as usual, every single episode I'm not referencing back to the manga. For obvious reasons, I want to enjoy the series for what it's worth as an anime-only experience, per se. It's going to be a lot more enjoyable for myself, and this video will be a lot more enjoyable for you guys as well. So, the anticipation for this week was pretty high, obviously because of a peculiar character making their appearance, which only happens right at the end. So, if you're excited about seeing this said character, you're going to have to wait a good bit. But we do kick off quite a important arc known as the auction raid, and they fly through this pretty quickly. I don't really have many positive things to say about this episode from any sort of perspective. Everything just felt very lackluster. The writing felt lackluster, the overall direction felt lackluster, the animation, I guess, was good at points and then lackluster at others. So it was this weird mix when I was watching it. It didn't really feel like a enjoyable experience. I wasn't like pissed off or annoyed by the episode per se. It was just more like when I finished watching, I was like, what did I just watch? I feel like I forgot everything as soon as I watched the episode. It was because there was no real impact. There was no real emphasis on anything throughout the entire episode, other than like the final 5 minutes with TAKIZAWA making an appearance, which I know a lot of people will be happy about. The way they done it was a little bit weird as well, to a degree. You know, you get to finally see him. Is good, I guess. They handle censoring very weirdly as well. Like they do this like mix censoring with like screen cutoff, so you don't necessarily get to see everything, which if that's an issue or not for you, I don't know. But I guess it's weird because it kind of adds to the whole backbone for TAKIZAWA's character. As you kind of come into the story, I guess you get some sort of idea of what TAKIZAWA's like as a character from this episode. Just a small portion. He's very obscure, he's just driven by insanity, and he's all over the place, realistically. So when you come to see more of him throughout the season, you obviously come to understand his character a lot better. But this episode gives you, I guess, a small glimpse of what's to come, which I think they kind of done a decent job with the amount of time they had and how they used it, but I think it could have been a lot better. I feel like they could have drove a lot more emphasis, whether it be the music they used or the scene or just, I don't know, direction in general for the episode, to drive a lot more oomph to his, I guess, craziness as a character. But it is pretty early on, so I'll leave it at that. One thing that really annoyed me throughout this episode, which now that I tell you guys, if you watched the episode already, you probably just glossed over it, but if you haven't, you'll most likely notice it now. But every single fight basically in this episode was started but never shown. Like, I fucking hate that. I think that's just a very poor way of trying to push a little bit of development, you know, push a fight that's happening and then like never show it. And they do it for like 6 different things. It's really disappointing because a lot of these fights you don't necessarily have to see, which is understandable, but it's the way they kind of cut it up throughout the episode. You get this bit of information, boom, you start the fight. You get this other bit of information, boom, you start a fight. And then you never end it. You never even get to see a bit of it. Like, I think the only thing you actually get to see is the Suzuya versus Ayato fight, which was like 30 seconds max. And then you also get to see the Naki and Misa fight with, you know, a couple of irrelevant CCG investigators, as well as Akira coming into play. So you see like 30 seconds of that as well. It's disappointing, you know what I mean? I understand the usage of like time and the essence of said impact, but when you do it repetitively throughout the episode, it got old very quickly for me, especially when it was done the exact same way every single time. Like, oh, here's a character, oh, they're gonna start a fight, cut to the next scene. Oh, here's a character, oh, they're gonna start a fight, cut to the next scene. It just gets repetitive, and it's just systematically failing throughout the entirety of the episode. Just drops. It's like, okay, bad. So in that front, in that aspect, because pretty much the fights is what carried this episode, or at least like the build up for fights carried the episode, very disappointing. I was a little bit disappointed in that. I think the best thing still throughout this episode for me was either the small snippet of like this investigator talking about, you know, him witnessing God, which was like a very young Arima. His character was like nervous that these new faces were going to obviously take over the CCG and push the old people out because, you know, they're getting old and they're stuck in their old ways. And then he witnesses Arima as like a teenager, and you don't get to see any of the flashback, basically, like no fighting or anything, but you just get to see Arima kind of standing over all these bodies. I think the music they used in that, I guess, as well as the impact of that scene, was really well done. It seemed very out of context though, because right, you have all these fights, you have the auction raid, whatever, and then you have this small snippet of Arima. It's like, what the fuck is he doing there? Like, regardless, I thought it was well done. That was probably like the best thing of the episode episode, even though it was so out of place or like out of context in terms of like how the episode was structured, as well as the interaction between Mudski and Torso. For some reason, I feel like Torso was really driving the narrative for this season so far, even though he's kind of been irrelevant. He's been the main kind of villain of the whole thing, but even though it was a small portion of Torso, but his reaction to Mudski was incredible. I was like, okay, like that's really good, right? It saddens me to see that they rip apart everything for Mudski's character and not showcase what really makes the character that is Mudski. So it would have helped drive that impact for Torso and why he's so obsessed, why he's so crazy. It just kind of comes off that he's just fucking insane to a degree. Like that's all he is, right? But there's a lot more character to him there, and there's a lot more reasoning for him on why he kind of chooses Mudski over everyone else. Lackluster, because they never play on Mudski's character. Will they ever play on it? I don't know. A lot of people said like, oh, you know, they can do flashbacks and everything, but you know, when you do flashbacks in future episodes, you're also missing the stuff that's meant to be where the flashback is, so it's kind of like, it doesn't really work that easily. So I don't know, but it's just funny to me how like some of the best bits for me personally is Torso, yet there is no emphasis behind Torso's motivation. It's basically just built on one side. You know, you got Torso that's building up, but Mudski isn't. So I'm just thinking to myself like how great these interactions would have been if you guys knew of Mudski's backstory and how they handle it, how they showcased it, and what that character went through, right? And why Torso is so obsessive, and how it kind of tailors Mudski throughout the story of Ri, because it plays a very big importance. I mean, now and later on down the line as well, when it plays like an initial impact. Right now, it's kind of just the development phase, but they've completely just cut it all out. They've just ripped it away from Mudski. So I think for the most part, that's basically it. I thought this episode, once again, was very lackluster. I'm not a big fan of, you know, building up a fight's anticipation and not showing it at all, because you best believe they're not going to show fucking 6 or 7 different fights that they built in next week's episode. It's more like, oh, well, you see the start of the fight, you can kind of guess what happens next, and I think that's very silly. You know what I mean? Like, it's a hard thing to handle because there's so many fights and there's so many things happening, and trying to fit that into 20-minute episodes is just it's a curse, basically. Like, there's no way that's possible. So it's unfortunate, but I felt like the overall direction for the episode could have been handled a lot better. There's a lot of stuff that generally could have been cut out of this episode that just would have helped pace the entire episode, right? A lot of interactions, a lot of preemptive fights that they could have completely cut out, right? They're cutting out all the important pieces, so like, why not just cut out this shit that's filling the episode? That's overall weird to me. The music, there was actually not all too much in this episode. Like, once again, the only thing that I can specifically mention is the Arima flashback, and that's about it. Everything else was just, it was pretty simple, you know, just reusage of what they already have, you know, far and few between. They didn't really play at it all too much, which I find it very odd. They kind of went for the more sound effects, which I guess makes a lot more sense because they're obviously in the auction and they're using all these like gimmicky sound effects kind of things, which I don't know if it came off cheap at the time. Now I'm looking back on it, maybe it wasn't that cheap, but I don't know. Some things I was laughing at in terms of like the sound effects that they were using. I mean, you get introduced to an abundance of different characters, which I'm not going to name because it's so fucking many, but at this point I feel like this episode was just filler. You know, it gives you some idea with what's going on. It's, you know, gives you the auction raid, introduces you to, you know, a lot of new characters, or reintroduces you to a lot of new characters, I should say. And it's the last time I'm going to say it, but I just feel like this episode was purely structured around Mudski, which is a good thing, which is what it was meant to be, I want to say. But because they've left out all the information for Mudski, as well as like the backstory, Torso, and just the overall emphasis, it's like they wanted to do it and then they pulled it halfway through and just littered it with like baseless fights. That's what I mean. So the intention for Mudski was in the episode, you know, it was the whole emphasis. Basically, he was the bait. They just kind of go away from it after that. You get to see Nutcracker, you get to see Takizawa and Eto, even Dr. Canal, but all kind of fruitless at the end of the day. So I'm hoping next week's episode is going to be better. I thought this episode was simple. It was easy. They played it safe. It was almost too safe. It was very lackluster. I thought there would have been a little bit better. The Suzuya and Aoto stuff wasn't all too bad. Like, Suzuya coming through wasn't all too bad, but once again, the whole chain of effects I was talking about, the whole snowball effect, just, you know, you start a fight and then they kind of just completely skip it, or they just don't pay attention to it whatsoever, and then they do it again and they do it again, and it kind of loses impact over time, you know what I mean? So I think that's kind of how I felt. I will say they had some nice still frames. That's basically it. Like, the animation was very normal. It's hard to say because like they had some decent moments, don't get me wrong, but at the same time they have these very oddly placed like still frames that slide or something else in its place, and it's just kind of like you don't necessarily notice it, but when you do notice it or when you do look for it, it's like, oh Jesus, like, okay. So that's basically it. Excited to see how they handle next week's episode, and I guess the direction they take take it in. I'm also interested to see what you guys thought of the episode. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you think it was lackluster? You think it could have been better? Etc, etc. To a degree, I obviously feel like it could have been done better, just not even looking from any other perspective, just from an anime only perspective. I feel like it could have been done a lot better. I just felt like it was just very simple. They played it really, really safe. Fucking hate the fact that they just started so many fights and you see like 10 to 30 seconds of it and then it's gone the next bit and then it's replaced by another fight and then again and then again, and it's just repetitive. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. I like the fact that TAKIZAWA was back. I guess that's a saving grace to a degree. With that being said, I'm actually going to end the video off here. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe. I greatly appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below and I'll catch you guys in the next video.